Right, in this video we're going to talk about 5 farces about big engines. A lot of people are saying that if you build a big VW engine, number one, it's not going to last. Second thing I hear all the time, it's going to run hot, Mike. They always run hot. The other thing I hear all the time, oh, it's going to burn so much fuel. They just don't get the same gas mileage. The other thing here is it's going to cost me way more money. Well, yeah, it is. It's going to cost you a little bit more money, but it'll be worth it. And lastly, I hear that it's not going to be as reliable. All of these things are 100% false. And this is if you do it right. And it all depends on how big you go. So let's go over this. Nobody beats the Volkswagen engineers, but we've done it for years, guys. See the bus behind me there? This has a 2007 in it. I can stand on the floor probably all day long. I've never been able to do that. I have to have a hill that was like 300 miles long. So I haven't been able to do that. But I've gone up hills for half an hour, 45 minutes, going uphill, standing on the floor the whole way, and it does not get hot. So let's address these things a little bit kind of in some sort of order. The first thing that I've heard is that they will not last. And it all depends on the size you do. The 74 and 76 stroke with the stock case will last a long time. Now, if you want to go bigger, you can go to a 78 or even an 82 with the aluminum case. And because the aluminum case has steel sleeves, I'm trying to remember what I was talking about so we can make it easier to explain. They're called shuffle pins, but it has steel sleeves that lock the two halves of the case together on all the mains. And those steel sleeves, along with it being aluminum, make that case way stronger. It makes it more like the Porsche engineered bigger 3-liter engines that they put in the 6-cylinder Porsches. And the strength of those things handle that larger stroke. And it will last a long time. I've got friends that have 150,000 miles on large stroke engines. Now try and take a regular 69 stroke 1600 and go 150,000 miles. Some will do it, but not even all of them will do it. And my friend did that. He had 150,000 miles, did a rebuild on his bus, and he had it in his Beetle, and he was pulling a trailer with it. So I don't know, a 600-pound trailer. You add that up with the Beetle, that's about like driving a bus. Okay, and he tows that thing everywhere. 150,000 miles. Decided to rebuild it. Only reason because it had 150,000 miles on it. It wasn't because it needed a rebuild. It wasn't worn out, and the engine lasted that long. So you can build a larger stroke engine with these aluminum cases, and they will last of just incredible amounts of time because it's upgraded engineering. It's not you're not taking the original Volkswagen case and just putting more stress on it. You're going with an upgraded case that's locked together with shuffle pins, and when you do that, it just makes a very, very long-lasting engine. That's what's in this bus here that I was just showing you on the outside of the video. It's happened to be raining outside, so I figured I'd sit inside. You guys, I know it's the old school thing to say that they don't last as long because you were looking at everything through glasses that you had in the 80s and 70s, because back then the parts were different that we had. They didn't have these aluminum cases until very recently. In fact, the first one was actually the Scat case back in the 80s, but they were $1,000 back then. You might as well have said $1 million because nobody could afford them. So what it comes down to is how you build the engine, and can you engineer it in a way that it's not going to run hot and it's not going to wear quickly There's a lot of good parts out there now. And of course, it all depends on how you drive it. You know, if you drive it like you stole it and you're just standing on the floor, you know, revving the thing up to 7,000 RPMs, of course it's not going to last. Anything, just take it with any car. If you drive anything, if you took a stock engine, you drove it like that, it's not going to last either. Believe me, we saw ones that guys drove. I remember people driving it with a 437 gear set, and they drive the thing 80 miles an hour, and they didn't even last 25,000 miles with stock, all original parts. The key thing to keeping the heat down and the reliability and all of these things and making it last is getting proper parts. You know, where I would like to start with when I go for something to I want one that's going to last is I'm going to start, this is a 4140 crank. I'm going to go with the 4340. The difference is these kind of can scratch a little easier. Okay. I mean, they're softer steel, and you know, if any little thing gets in there, it can scratch this kind of like the VW cranks, the original ones. But if you get the 4340, those things are so hard. It's like you can bing, try and hit it with a hammer, and it doesn't even put a dent in it, you know, like your tools and stuff like that. They're really, really, really tough. Okay. So I like to start with a 4340 crank. That's what I have in the 2007 in that bus out there. And I have it in my other one. Now my other bus the other thing is you keep the compression ratio low. I run into like an 8 1/4 to 1 for that size of an engine. That's actually great. If you go up to like 9 to 1, that's when you start having problems. That's when people they start grouping it in and saying that all of them are like this because, you know, because this one guy they know that has this, you know, a 9 to 1 compression engine or 10 to 1 compression, you know, stroker engine, which is what people used to do back in the old days because they had those little small combustion chambers in the heads, which you guys, all that's been updated now. You can get the larger, you know, combustion chamber heads. All those things are all available, and that's why these engines can be so reliable, long-lasting, where back in the old days, maybe that was true. Maybe the performance engines didn't last. But today, you can really build one that'll last. And the other key thing is stay away from the dual carbs. So, you know, on my buses, I run the 2-barrel. Okay, and, you know, I'm not standing in it all the time. Now, if I have to go up a hill, I've got the power. I can just stand on the floor. It'll just do it. It'll just keep going. And that thing, the 2007 will it sounds so cool. It just runs. It just sings down the road. And you just stand on it. And it's just like, wah, you know, just going right up the hill. It doesn't care. Okay, now if you do that with my 1904, that I have in my other bus with 9 to 1 compression. Why did I could have done the 1968. I had pistons to do a 1968. Why did I go a 1904? It's because I had a set of already cut stock early heads. They were in good shape. I had them already. I had the equipment to do the valves, so I went with those that were already opened up for 90.5s. So it didn't make sense for me to spend the money for the 92s and reopen those heads up. And the other issue is, like I say in the other videos, is the combustion chamber on these old heads was only 50 cc. The new heads are 55 and on up. I mean, I've seen 55, 60 cc on a lot of those heads. So if I was buying new heads, it would have been dumb for me not to go with the 1968. It would have been crazy. Why not just go with the bigger engine? See, you have limitations on things that you're based on the parts you have. And I wasn't as worried about that engine going 100,000, 200,000 miles. I baby it a bit. If I baby it, it probably will still go that many miles. But, you know, you can get an engine to last longer, a long time, you know, if you engineer it and build it right. So the other thing that you really want to look into is make sure your valve geometry is really, really nice. If it's really in the middle, and things like running stainless steel valves, okay, and if you do that, you're going to have to run lash caps or elephant adjusters, the larger adjuster that fits over the valve. There's a couple different ones out there, but they have the elephant and they have another one, the Porsche style, they call them adjusters, where they have a little flat spot on a ball that rides on the valve. They help the valve train last a lot longer. The other people I've heard said that performance cams cause a lot of wear on the engine. There's a lot of ways around that. You can do things like adding the FK series cam that has less. It's easier on the valve train. It's because it uses a ratio rocker system versus using the standard 1.1 to 1 rockers, and that will help get the valve train to last long with the performance cam. Now the trick is just don't go really big on the cam. So you can build a performance engine, and I'm not talking about, you know, something you're going to win races with. If you're building something like that, yeah, it's not going to last. You know, you're going to like 10, 12, 14 to 1. I've seen guys up to that, you know, and trying to drive that on the street. It's just not going to last. Common sense, I think, will tell you that. But if you stick with things that work, you look at the FK series cams and some of those things, or even you can do the same thing even with, if you're a little cheaper route, is to use the SCAT cams. The SCAT has something similar. They have the C20s, the CC25, and those need ratio rockers to make them work. So you can use those. Like the C25 is pretty good. It has pretty good lift and duration, and you can put that in up to like a 1904 or 1968, or even a little bit bigger engine. Remember, the bigger the engine likes a little more cam. So just keep that in mind. The key is just, you know, use common sense. I mean, if you're building an engine and you want it to last, you know, you don't go and give it 10 to 1 compression or even 9. If you stay with like 8 1/4 on a, you know, on a mag case engine, and same thing with the aluminum, you stay with the low 8 1/4. Some engines you can get up to 8 1/2 and still be pretty good. It just depends. You kind of got to really spend some time, do some research, find out what works, find out what doesn't work. Look at the Samba. There's a lot of stuff, information on there, and there's a lot of misinformation on there. And kind of weed through it and figure out what stuff works. Most of the engine builds that I talk about, that I say they're bulletproof engine builds, they're ones that'll last. They'll last a long time. Well, like I said, the 1904 that's in this bus may not last as long. It's because I'm running 9 to 1 compression. Again, I didn't want to spend the money on buying new heads. I just bought the heads for the other engine, and I spent like $4,000, $5,000 wholesale for all the parts for it. So when I was doing this one, I was kind of like, well, I've got these heads. They're good. They're 48cc. Okay, 48cc is, I'm going to max out. I went to like 9 to 1 because I was at 48cc and about 60 deck, if I remember right. Because I don't like to have more barrel fire, so I want to have that fire in the head, and that's what I sacrifice. Now, what I think the weak point is going to be on this thing is at some point, I'm probably going to have to put a new set of heads on. You know what I mean? And I know that. So is it going to last forever? Maybe not quite as long, but it'll still last a long time. I'll be really happy with the mileage I'll get out of it, and at some point I'll probably just change the heads. When I get to that point where things start to go south, I'll probably just do a top end. New pistons and cylinders, new heads, and keep running the bottom end. Now the bottom end on this is a 4340 crank. It's got chromoly rods, H-beam rods, or I-beam rods. I-beam, not H-beam. And, you know, I've got the alternator, reliable alternator. I've got this pointless system, reliable. This is an AS41 German case with the blocked out number 3. You cannot find one of these. Don't look for it, because you're just not going to find it. Okay, AS41 German, blocked out number 3, the best case probably ever made. That's magnesium. So the bottom end, I've got a 4340, one of these guys in there. These things will last, you guys. So the 4340, I mean, it's such a hard steel, chromoly steel. This is a 4140, but like I said, the 4340 has the same look. Spending, it's about an extra $40 or $50 for the 4340 over the 4140. And I remember back when I bought those, it was $20 more. Now it's a little more than that. But you know, get the 4340 if you're looking to build that long longevity motor, and start there. These here are really good rods. You know, they're made in China, but they really do work well and they last. So you can get a set of these, a set in that, and have a really long lasting engine that gives you more power. Now, again, you can't drive the thing like you stole it, but man, it's nice to have the power when you need it and to use it, you know, properly. And having the counterweights on there is what's going to help out with the case wear. So when one of these things here fires, okay, the shock from that fire is taken up with this counterweight. So less harmonics are going through the crankshaft to the flywheel. Like in the old engineered 1600, you had the stock crank didn't have these counterweights on it, right? So what would happen is when the engine would fire and push this rod, it would go through the whole crankshaft and to the flywheel on only a 4 dowel crank. So on these performance cranks, they have 8 dowels on them. So that helps right there to help up with that strength. It's all in how that you do your engine. You guys, if you build it to be a race car, it's not gonna last. But if you build it to be a powerful driver, in other words, you just kind of undercarburate it. Maybe, you know, some of these have, I could put like dual carbs on the 2007 and that thing would fly. I could probably, and I would probably need to give it a little bit more compression for the cam that's in it. That makes, maybe not. I probably could just put dual carbs right on it, and it would take you up to about 6,500, 7,000 RPMs, and it would just get up and go. But what's going to happen if I start driving it like that is it's not going to last. You know, I'm pushing it to the limit. So what you're doing is you're building an engine that has kinetic power. So it has power is there, okay? You could use it, but you're just not using it. So that it can still last a very, very, very long time by just using that kinetic power theory and building your engine that way. It really, it makes a lot of this stuff. I just don't know where people get this stuff that, you know, I mean, I know where to get it from. Because back in the old days, okay, when you built a performance engine, you take your stock 69 non-counterweighted crank and you build it to go fast. You didn't 8-dowel the crank and you didn't have counterweights and you didn't care because, you know what, they were super cheap and you could just go build another one. So guys would say, oh, those performance engines don't last. But if you're building it with today's parts, with stuff like 4340 cranks, you know, chromoly rods, the old theory of the old 2180 that doesn't last, you can build a 2180 now that would last. You could build it. Let me just give you some examples of what parts you'd put in something like that. You start with the aluminum case, okay? You get the 82 crank, okay? You get the clearanced cam, like an FK series cam, or You could even, well, I guess there's a couple of the other options on that. But use the FK series where you use the ratio rocker so that you don't have the valve train wear. I would run the 40-35 heads. That's what I have on that other one. I'd run the bigger valve heads. Remember the aluminum case, it's shuffle pinned on all the mains, not just the center main like the old racer technique. I was talking to a friend of mine on that too, on the early cases, and he goes, you know, I used to see him break the case in the middle. You know, all kinds of stuff can happen when you're going way over the top with performance. But if you're just using it, like I say, kinetic power, and you've got it there when you need it, that engine can last. 82 with that, and then 92 thick wall cylinders. Back in the old days, so to compare that build to what you used to do back in the old days so that you guys can realize this is way more reliable than it used to be, way longer lasting. Back in the old days, you had a thin wall 92, really, really thin, so they ran hot. All right. And then on top of that, you had guys would take their stock rods and they would clearance them. So you take a regular stock rod and they just take it to the bench grinder and just grind away on the thing until it clearanced really good. And then you put that in your 2180. Well, no wonder why they didn't last. On the 2180, if I did that, I would probably, because it is a little bit bigger engine and it has potential of revving very quickly, I might go with the H-beam rods instead of the I-beam. These are the I-beams. I would go with a little bit longer rod because I would want a nice long rod ratio. Now, the issue you might run into in building one of those 2180s is it was going to be a really kind of a wide engine because you're going to have a lot of shims in there to bring the cylinders out, and that's going to make it tough to fit in some of your early Beetles. Some of the guys have these oval windows, the 54s, they have those big engines in them, and they're used to doing it. They might have to take all the tin off, take the exhaust off to get it in the car, and then put all that stuff, a lot of the pieces on after it's in the car. They might have to actually trim the back tin because it's going to be wider. The engine's going to be, maybe 1/4 of an inch wider than, because you got 1/8 of an inch on each side in shims. Just giving you examples, and the engine's going to be wider than stock. So those 2180s can last, but they're going to be a little tougher to fit in your car. So there is some difficulties in that. In a bus, I don't think it's an issue. So the other thing is gas mileage. And people go, well, if you build a bigger engine, the gas mileage is going to be good. I get 20, I was getting 22 at one point. I don't know what the most recent one is because I changed my tire sizes. I was getting 22 miles a gallon in the dark red bus. 22 miles a gallon with a 1904, and it definitely sets you back in the seat. And it's because you got to have the proper gears. So if you have the gears upgraded, so in that bus, I'm running, well, they don't really, I don't know if they're making them right now, but they were making 344 gears for a while. And I had the 344 gears in that with a bug fourth. So the final drive on it was 3.85. And, in a Beetle, that's easy to do. I mean, that's like a stock 412 or something like that. So, if you have it set up right, the key thing to doing that is not get too much air and fuel in the combustion chamber, but have the exact proper amount in there for the engine size, which is a little tricky to do, but you can get really good gas mileage with a bigger engine, especially because you can gear it up a little bit. You can get a little more gear ratio on it, make the engine, lug it a little bit, not too much because you got an air-cooled engine, but it can lug a little bit more and it's not going to hurt it because it's not working very hard. And so, yeah, you can get really good gas mileage as well. So the key things, low compression, valve train that doesn't get beat up. If you're going to do it, I would go to stainless steel valves, okay? And then when you go to stainless steel valves, you got to go to elephant adjusters and some of that stuff. On the smaller engines, you could do it with stock valves. It would work. Now, with any of the VW engines, it doesn't matter if you use a stock engine, if you're doing a 1600, today's fuels like to eat up valves, the exhaust valves and exhaust valve guides. So even for a stock engine, it wouldn't hurt to go run in, put the stainless steel valves in it, because they dissipate the heat better, is what I understand. I don't really quite understand the engineering of it, but they do work better. That was something that came out back in the day when they got rid of leaded fuel. They used to only have leaded regular, and regular, it worked in a VW, but because they have so much higher combustion temperatures, they really like premium fuel. And I know I've got so many guys that are like, oh no, they don't need that, 90 RON, 91 RON. No, they like premium fuel because it's hotter. The engine, how many of your regular water-cooled engines run at 260 degrees and survive? These cars run that all the time. And, at the head temp. So that's a lot hotter than your regular engine. Some are running over 300. Like, you're climbing a hill, it might go up to even close to 400 degrees head temp. And, and then it cools itself back down. And that's the way they operate, you guys. They need something that can handle higher pressures, because when you have higher temperatures, the pressures go up. So now, instead of it being like a 7-to-1 engine, it's like a 12-to-1 engine because of all that extra pressure from the temperature being higher. So you really need to put premium fuel most of the time in your Volkswagen. Now, I think in my 2007, I probably could run regular. I tried it. I actually went to a pump one time and they didn't have any premium. And I had to climb a really big hill, and I was like, all right, I'll just throw some regular in it. I ran it up the hill, didn't ping, didn't care, and just floored it all the way up. Going like 60. Not enough fan going through that motor at 60. Didn't care. So the idea that a performance engine won't last is really, I really don't think I think it's just a farce. And it's based on old information that's outdated, okay? And, you can build something, at least something decent performance. The engine sizes that I think you could build, ones to stay away from. Let me put it that way. Let's go with those. The 1904 or 1914, anything 94 bore, that motor has issues already because it's so thin to the case. It's so thin to the case savers. No, that's not what I'm talking about. Nothing 94. So the 1914, Okay, the engines you can build performance. You can even do this with a 1600. You could put a 1600 with 8.5 compression and a cam. That's going to outrun a stock 1600 tenfold. Okay, you can do that, and you can probably get 100,000, 150,000 miles out of it. But I think you could probably do better if you did counterweighted. Okay, that would probably last a lot longer. So the next ones I was going to say are, you could do the old 1776 with a counterweighted crank. You could do the 1835 with a counterweighted crank. Wouldn't recommend that because I would rather go to a 1904, which is a 74 stroke. So the 74 stroke 1904 is like a 1776 with a 74 stroke. You can go to the 1968 as long as you have heads with large combustion chambers. If you go to the 1968, you got to really focus on those combustion chamber sizes. You want, 55cc, 57cc heads, okay, to keep that so you don't have a, big giant barrel fire, okay? You want to stay away from that. And then the other things you can do, you can even go up to the 2007. That's another really good engine. 2168. I think that's what, 2174. That's what it is. A 74 by 92 thick wall. Another really good engine. And with those, I like to go with the aluminum case. Okay, so the bigger ones, you go with the aluminum case. You get to the shuffle pins on all the mains. Okay, and you can go to even a 2180. Ooh, how about that? Oh my God, a 2180 that lasts? No, that's sacrilegious. No, guys, it can last. A 2180, an aluminum case, you know, and the other things are run the proper oil pump. You know, I mean, look, the bucket truck was running the toughest engine. What is the toughest engine Volkswagen ever made? Anybody know? It's the 40 horse. Why do you think they used it in equipment and all that other stuff? The 40 horse is the toughest engine ever made, right? It's really not, but that's what everybody thinks. The 40 horse that was in the bucket truck, that thing killed it. It just killed it. Why? Because it was still only the 17 millimeter oil pump in it. You got to upgrade all that stuff. You got to look at what they did in the later years. You know, you can't make a 1776 with a 21 millimeter oil pump with a full flow system on it. It's not going to last. Okay, you got to have all the right stuff in it. It's got to have, you know, the 26 or the 30 or 31 or whatever, more oil in there, and make sure it's right. If everything's right, a performance engine can last, especially when you're not putting large carburation on it, because you're basically getting kinetic power. You're getting a lot of torque, okay? And you can do that and have an engine that's going to last, that's going to have more power on the road, and do a lot more than what you're going to do with just a little 1600, thinking, oh, wow, this is going to be the most reliable engine, when, you know, they didn't even counterweight them. I mean, that was cheap. They were being super cheap. That's what VW was doing. They were building a cheap car. Okay, and when you build it without the counterweights, you're building it the cheap way. Build it like a Porsche, then it's not cheap. It's built better. That's why they were more money. All right, I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Please like, share, and subscribe.